Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Rutherford County School Board policy meeting tonight. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd stand, please, led by Mr. Beltala.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chairman, you need to make sure we train everybody up on the pledge. There is no pause.
There's what?
There's no pause.
Was there a pause?
Yes.
That was my fault. I'm from Ohio. That's a little Yankee thing. I apologize.
Well, that
I'll
explains
make that correction and I'll have that taken care of.
You're forgiven.
Just the word Ohio explains a lot, doesn't it? Okay, well, we're already ahead of last night. Next order of business is the approval of the agenda. And you've read these things, and thank you, Ms. Bush, for sending everything out. Is there a motion to approve that? We need to do that. Good.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Blair. A second from someone? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody object? And they do not. And policy review, Ms. Bush.
Thank you. I would just say Section 3 and Section 4 are for review. If anyone has any changes they would like to see made to those sections, they can contact me via email or by phone, and we can look at making those changes, any revisions that you see. I will inform the committee that this will be moving to the board agenda so instead of appearing on our policy review agenda on the policy committee meeting, it will be moved to the board agenda so it can be reviewed on a monthly basis. It makes it a little easier to cover those sections as well, just a FYI for the committee. If there are no questions with regards to that, I'll move on to medicines. So our medicines policy was changed to address students with adrenal insufficiencies. This policy is changed and includes and aligns with policy 6.405 to new language required by the state board. I've invited Ms. Winters, our health coordinator, here to speak to you about this. This is something we are already doing. It's just formalizing it and putting it into the policy language. So if you have any questions related to adrenal insufficiency, I'll invite Ms. Winters up and she can explain a little bit about what we're doing related to this addition to the policy.
This year, and it's been implemented in the district. We have 5 students right now who have adrenal insufficiency with medications at schools. The law says that there has to be training by a nurse practitioner and MD. I developed a plan, sent it to our medical director, Dr. Marcy Castleberry. She approved it. We implemented, trained all the nurses. And there's a full-time nurse in every building where there's a student who has an identified adrenal insufficiency medication that's signed in. And a nurse will be provided whenever there's an excursion, a field trip, anything that will require that medication be administered. It is an IM injection, and there are a few oral medications that are given if there's a mild case that's determined. We have an action plan that we developed with endocrinologist at Vanderbilt. So I think we're on target with this. Any questions?
Any questions from the committee or Ms. Winters or in relation to the policy change? Need a motion?
Need a motion to approve? Someone?
Move to approve.
Thank you. A second? Any comments from board members, policy committee members? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Ms. Winters is standing there. I want to compliment her. She's done some work get some things for EpiPens. Actually, it's not the brand name, at no cost to the system and for the students, so it's a good deal. She's been working.
Kids that they don't have to bring their own in?
So next year we'll be implementing stock epinephrine across the district, which means that we'll be working with Mylan to provide at least two EpiPens. It's not EpiPen brand, but epinephrine and auto injectors for every school. We'll actually have 2 adult epinephrine injectors for
we'll have 2 sets for every high school and middle school, and an adult and a junior for all the elementary schools. They are provided free of charge right now, and the program is, they don't anticipate ever charging school districts for the epinephrine, so as long as it's free of charge, they replace them every year, whether they're expired or not, which just seems outrageous to me, but that's, you know, they just routinely replace them every year. They would be used for anybody, an adult, a visitor, an employee, a student who is suspected of experiencing an anaphylactic response. Whether it was a known allergy and they didn't have their own epinephrine at school, or the first reaction that they had. So it would just be for whoever needed it. So, and we'll do mass training in the fall of all school employees so that they'll at least be alert. We already do some training of what anaphylaxis means, but anybody can administer an epinephrine autoinjector then. So yeah, exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
5B.
Yes, this is a policy, policy 1.407, related to school district records. TSBA made us aware that we were needing to change this to comply with statute TCA section 10.7.503, and it just requires that record requests may be submitted in person or by telephone, fax, mail, or email. I do want to clarify that we are still requiring those submitting records requests to produce identification as per the statute. The statute does allow for us to ask for identification before we release records pursuant to those public records requests. The policy change also requires us to name a public records coordinator. My office currently serves as that, and so you'll see my information provided in the policy. Any questions related to that?
Need a motion?
The change was they could do it electronically, right?
Yes, email.
Had to have included. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Young. A second. Any questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Part C.
Yes, this policy was requested to be changed from Mr. Sandvik's office. This is policy 2.8001. It's the travel reimbursement policy. The policy has been updated to reflect current language of the Tennessee Comprehensive Travel Regulations in relation to reimbursement for meals and incidentals for the day of departure. So it deletes some of our current language and changes that language to match that those travel regulations.
Questions? Need a motion?
Move to approve the change.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Blair. Any comments? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Part D.
This is policy 5.108. We had a request to amend this policy to include that employees shall, within 72 hours, report to their immediate supervisor if the employee is a petitioner or respondent on a restraining order or order of protection. There are exemptions to this policy, such as if the restraining order or order of protection is a part of a divorce decree or other court order that is exempted or otherwise confidential. From that, the supervisor would have to report to the director of schools. The rationale behind this is that if you have an order of protection, there may be a dangerous domestic situation that the school would need to be aware of to take care of and be aware of the order of protection existing to protect the employee, to better protect the employee and as well as other faculty, staff, and students.
They actually had a case where I think a husband came to school, my wife teaches here, they recognized him, that sort of thing, but we're not aware of what had happened prior to that and this restraining order. And so they allowed him in, and that it was bad.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday. Second? Thank you. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Part E.
Policy 5.701 is another change recommended by TSBA. They just recommended that we provide a specific language related to who will prepare the list of substitute teachers. We have included that. That list will be prepared by our contracted substitute provider. This is something they're already doing. It's just, again, formalizing it in our language and in our policy.
Any questions? Need a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. If there are no questions, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Part F.
Okay, so this
Yellow.
Yes, so
Oh, my goodness.
this was a change today, and I apologize for that delay in getting this to you. Policy 6.200 is the result of a statute change. Currently, this is codified as Public Chapter 379. It's regarding progressive truancy interventions, and the state is currently working with the juvenile justice system as well as school districts to address increasing truancy problem. So in response, the state has created a tiered system that it wants LEAs to adopt. The tiers are in our policy are fairly relaxed, very broad, and that gives the director of schools discretion to implement administrative policies and procedures that would adhere to state law, but allow us some flexibility in dealing with our truancy issues. As you can imagine, with 47 schools, one truancy resolution would work for one school. It may not work for another, depending on the different populations and different schools. So our policy today has that. It has also another amendment toward the back. It's just really a wording change. The attendance hearing is currently in our policy, but it doesn't have specific dates. The state board policy has specific dates in their policy, so this wording has been changed to reflect that wording in the state board policy. I've spoken with the director of schools as well as Mr. Spurlock and the attendance coordinator in relation to these changes. They are supportive. Mr. Spurlock had a great idea of coming up with a truancy committee to address our concerns, consisting of 3 principals from our core leadership team, as well as advocates from our juvenile justice system, to look at what will work within our school district for this policy.
Now, is this like 3 days in a row or 3 days in a semester or?
It's cumulative, yes, thank you. It is three cumulative days, so overall.
So from the start of school to Christmas break, if they miss the first day of school and a day in the middle and a day before Christmas break.
Yes, that would trigger this policy. It would have to be an unexcused absence, though, so
Right.
excused absences won't trigger this.
Okay.
It's tied back to chronic absenteeism, which is in the federal ESSA law, Every Student Succeeds Act. And, one of the measures was tied back to some of that. It's still in place, though, that we require, another Tennessee statute requires the letter to go home to the parents at the end of 5 days.
Yes.
10 days, 15 days. That's, in the past, the 10 and 15 was handled by our truant officers, attendance department, I think. The school would generate it, so.
And if the parent refuses to meet?
That's when truancy officers would get involved, and that's when the local juvenile justice center would get involved. So we've been working, the DA's office is on board, and we're going to be talking with the juvenile judges, magistrates, to develop administrative procedures that will complement this policy.
Is that something that would trigger
No, this is, the statute is more meant to be, they talk about restorative justice practices, so the teen courts that you're kind of hearing about, community service, it's, like I said, it's going to look different for each school, and some schools are already doing a really great job. I know Mr. Luker at Smyrna Middle does a really great job with us and kind of has developed his own policies in relation to his truant students. So it would look different at every school, but it's not supposed to be punitive because we want the students in the classroom. That's the ultimate goal. We want them in the classroom.
This was spurred by the juvenile court system because of the number of truancy referrals, actually.
Yes.
Technically in Tennessee, if you're absent 5 days unexcused, you're a truant under the law. Of course, all of that can accumulate for somebody to lose their driver's license, right? Mr.
Right.
Powell? And other factors too. So people don't really realize sometimes the things that can kick in. So maybe with some of these committees and meeting together with parents, they'll realize that there's pretty good sanctions down the road. And then supposedly after they've been through the tiered system, then you can submit them to the court. The court
Yes.
can then choose to take action against the parent or the student, depending on age and that sort of thing.
When we review those discipline, and you hand in that too when it comes to us to review one, and I don't know how many we do a year, but it's not all that many, the appeals. You go to the attendance of the student, and I think that, I'm pretty sure maybe the parents are not aware that we get the records all the way back to maybe the very beginning, certainly the 6th grade. And invariably, attendance has been an ongoing problem, and signing out early and coming in late without question. Maybe 10, 15, 20 days, not unusual at all. I'm glad to see, I don't know if this will work or not, or this extra attention put on this, but I'm glad to see trying to attack this a little bit.
The chronic absenteeism definition is missing 10% of the days enrolled. It really doesn't matter what's excused or unexcused. Well, there's some special exceptions if you can't attend school for a reason. One of the things that Tennessee Department are working up in all in schools that begin to communicate, your child will be labeled as chronically absent if they miss more than 10% of the days they belong at school. So maybe that'll get some attention also in that. But roughly 11,000 Rutherford County students are chronically absent. Wow. There's almost 45,000. That's how prevalent it's become. Ask employers about employees going to work and stuff too. And unfortunately, we're seeing too much of this in society all across.
Yeah, when the Chamber of Commerce was here last year, they had the same problems in the business world with adults. Y'all remember? And he just said 10%, which is 18 days, roughly. Well,
It'd be less than that if you enter late.
Yeah, well, that's a month.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a month of your school year, so you miss 4 months in 4 years. I doubt if there's a job that you could keep for very long in society if you were absent, that often. I think the boss would take very kindly to that.
Well, Mr. Jordan, I remember a year or two ago, you guys discussed in a board meeting the concern of kids just staying out on half days.
Right.
Remember that meeting?
Yes.
So we talked about that now. How does a half day work? Does that just count for a half day missed?
3 hours and 16 minutes. The minimum Tennessee school day is 6 hours, 30 minutes. If a child will attend at least 3 hours and 16 minutes, the state will consider them in attendance for that day. Anything less than that, and you'll be counted absent for the day. It does that rounding off based on half of the state minimum school day.
So a student could be chronically late or a chronic leave early, but if they're fulfilling that 3 1/4 hours,
Technically.
it's not considered an attendance issue or an
Well, he is for everybody at the school and everybody else because, one of the hard things, and Mr. Tollett's over there and Mr. Spurlock too, it interrupts the class period. When the kid comes in late in the morning, 10 or 15 minutes, the teacher's teaching, the kids are involved. If you're not really careful, it breaks the thought process, breaks the concentration. It has more an effect than people realize.
Just a quick question. What's the definition of unexcused absence? Go over it again for me. So what we ran into, just as an example, is the child had a note from the doctor and the child forgot the note. So if that happens 3 times, we have 3 unexcused absences. So we had a doctor's appointment, we left early, we forgot the note, that's marked unexcused?
They will, Rutherford County has another policy. Basically, you know, if you don't bring something, they're gonna at least temporarily tag it as unexcused until the proof shows. But parents, you can, is it 9 days? I think 9 days a parent can, on their own recognizance, he's sick this morning, he had a fever. Doctors are pretty much unlimited if they write that the child is sick. Now, why does the letter go home after 5 days? One of the reasons is that so if there is an error, because it even says in this policy that you come and if you can bring the proof, we just didn't get it turned in or something, then that can be considered in that. So we're not wanting to punish, we just want the kids at school. So if there's been a mistake or something, it's a time to correct it.
The proposed policy refers to referral to a school-based teen court. I'm reading from Tier 3. At present, I'm not aware of any school-based teen courts anywhere in our system.
No.
And even though it says that, you know, we may use that as an option, by listing it here in policy, it offers someone the opportunity to say, hey, I want a teen court. Are we at liberty to remove item 3 there under Tier 3, and we still can use any intervention process that may include, but it's not limited to? Should we choose to use a teen court, we could, but we're not listing it there to offer someone the opportunity to say, hey, I want a teen court.
And that language is taken directly from the state statute. That was one of the 3 options that the state statute listed, and it was recommended by TSBA that those be included just so that you're mirroring the policy. That's why we added the language, it may consist of, but is not limited to these 3. What we envision doing is creating an administrative procedure that complements this, and then that will flesh out exactly what procedures will be utilized. And that's where that attendance committee would come in, so we're able to weigh, we're able to talk to the DA's office and juvenile justice and figure out what's going to work for them and what's going to work for us. We need their buy-in, we need this, so we'll flesh that out. This just gives options, and these options are just reflective of the state statute. So that's what all of that is. I wouldn't feel comfortable taking it out at this point because it was recommended by TSBA, and is one of the reasons we were able to keep the policy so broad.
I would feel comfortable taking it out because I'm not bound by TSBA's recommendations. Our Rutherford County standards are our standards and are our highest standards, as long as we're not in violation of statute. And with the permissive language that's there, I don't see where we would be in violation of statute. And if the committee in the future were to, you know, put in place what a teen court would look like, what authority a teen court would have, et cetera, but frankly, I'm not comfortable making mention in our board policy of the existence of a teen court without really understanding what's that teen court going to do.
And I have the statute in front of me. It does say additional interventions may consist of one or more of the following, and it mentions referral to a school-based teen court. So it's not required under the statute, so it would be up to the policy committee whether they wanted to take that out or leave it in.
But I think a Tier 3 has to be in place before your truant officer can actually take out a petition.
That is correct.
So you're going to have something there. You understand what I'm saying? That's part of this progressive thing, that you had to go through all the tiers before the truant officer could go seek that petition for truancy.
Right. I'm not suggesting we eliminate Tier 3, just option 3 under Tier 3. All I would suggest, and I'm interested in the committee's feedback, I don't know what a teen court's going to be. I don't know what a teen court's going to do. I've never seen a teen court before, and before I write that in policy, I'd like to know can somebody define a teen court? Because that's kind of handing some authority to somebody that we've never handed authority to before in this board policy.
I know other school districts are using them. They were taking, when the legislature was working on this, I think they took a lot of it from Blount County and from,
Some even for discipline use
Cheatham,
teen courts. Kids
yes.
are kind of tough on other kids sometimes.
Yeah.
And it builds peer pressure and other things in, but they cannot do any, they can't put a kid out of school or anything. I mean, it's limited in what they can do. But, I mean, I understand what you're saying, because we're in new territory,
We are.
no question.
Well, it is in statute, correct?
yes.
And we do pay TSBA to advise us on policy. I'm not sure that it would be wise for us to deviate from that advice, because it's been handed down by the legislature, and then it's been advised by the service that we pay for. So since other districts have used it apparently effectively, I would think we would keep it in there and then let the director of schools devise that process with central office.
Administrative procedures are based upon the policy. You make the policy. Administrative procedures kind of informs the schools how to apply that policy. The reason is, as I talked with Ms. Bush about that, we don't want it to be so detailed in the policy. This is new, across the state of Tennessee, new law, new statute, going into effect 18-19 school year. So if you run into a roadblock or an issue that you need to change, you can change administrative procedure much quicker than us coming to a policy committee that may not meet for 6 months and then requires 2 board meetings. So I would be certainly comfortable with the director and the committees putting together those administrative procedure to apply this policy. You're gonna find out pretty quick if it doesn't work. This has a potential to be overwhelming. I'm gonna tell you. I mean, when I
There's
saw
a lot there.
it scared me to death. I hate to take a lot of school time as quickly as these pieces kick in. It can be overwhelming. That's what's happened to the juvenile court. They've got so many truancy cases, they were overwhelmed.
That's correct.
And we
That's
may be
exactly right.
overwhelmed here at the school level, what I see, but, hello.
Well, am I reading this correctly in that,
Says it's not limited to. So if you felt the need, could you use more than one? Like could you do school-based community service and referral to a school-based teen court? Or does it have to be just one of these 3 choices?
I think you could be progressive. You know, I would think you initially would start at something a little lower level. You want to play your trump card first.
Yeah.
And that's the whole RTIB function that schools have been trained on now is a progressive intervention type system.
So within this tier 3, though, these 3 options, like
You could even progress up. You might start with school-based community services and then progress to the teen court.
so you're not limited to,
Not the way I read it.
No, it's very broad, and we did that for a reason, because we don't know what's going to work yet. So, you know, and these 3 don't limit this policy either. It could be outside of those 3. Those were just 3 suggestions made by the statute.
Age of the student. Sometimes the parents at fault, not the student. You know, that's what's interesting, if they're too young to make that decision to come to school or not.
By including referral to a school-based teen court in the Rutherford County policy, we are endorsing the recommendation in the statute, we are endorsing the recommendation by TSBA, and we're saying, yep, our stamp of approval as well. And I don't know what a teen-based court is in Rutherford County, and I cannot be comfortable putting a teen-based court into our policy without a definition of what a teen-based court is. I strongly recommend that this committee consider this policy recommendation with the exclusion of Tier 3, sub-item number 3. I'm prepared to make that motion if the chair is ready.
I'm ready.
Chairman, I make the motion that we adopt the policy as presented with the exclusion of Tier 3, item number 3, referral to a school-based teen court.
That motion needs a second from someone.
I second.
That was Mr. Tollett, I believe. Further discussion?
Ms. Bush, if this was deleted, and Mr. Reed too, if this is deleted, do you see issues developed by parents if the system developed a teen court and it's not mentioned? Do we have a parental issue going, wait a minute, where'd this come from? Because this is not stated anywhere in policy or procedure. Why would you subject my child to a teen court if you haven't mentioned it anywhere in your any verbiage?
And I can answer that too. The restorative justice program is pretty broad. Restorative justice programs are taking very many forms, so that could include a teen court. There's an argument there. So if it's broad enough for the director of schools to look at the issues there are with implementing this policy and address those issues through the procedures, which is why we kept it so broad, so the director of schools would have discretion there with input from principals and the committee that we're discussing forming, and of course the justice system as well.
I just hate to see us deviate from language given to us by the legislature, and when we've been advised by the service that we pay for their professionalism along with yours and Mr. Reed, and I just hate deviating from that in this case. So I would vote against the motion.
If this were in there as is, would that be in the student handbook at the beginning of the year? Would we go into that much of a detail?
One of the reasons she's meeting now, because this thing, we do have to print whatever we're going to print kind of by fall. Of course, it still has to go through the 2 readings by the board, but she starts running into deadlines to get it back before school starts.
Mid-June is when we try to have it out.
So if it was in there, a student could expect a teen court, maybe. Yeah.
If it's within the administrative procedures developed by the director of schools.
I'd be interested why Mr. Tollett thought it might not.
Yeah, I am too. I was going to ask him in just a minute. I just wondered if that's going to be in the student handbook. Evidently it is, so they could expect to have a teen court. Mr. Tollett. The director and I, at least, what is your reason? I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just very well.
That's no problem. The only experience that I've ever had with the teen court is at a private school where they take an oath of honesty, an oath not to lie, cheat, and steal in front of their peers. They get up and they make a statement, and they say, every student in the school makes a statement, I will not lie, cheat, or steal. I will not take part in plagiarism. And then when they have issues, then they go before a teen court. I don't know of any example here in Rutherford County either. That's the only time I've ever heard of teen court. It's been used in a private school setting where they do things like that.
Riverdale had a teen court in its first few years. I have no idea how it worked. I do know that the principal told me that the students imposed more severe penalties than the teachers did. Now, Stewart's Creek has got a court room.
But that's juvenile justice, yeah. CTE.
What's that for?
CTE, juvenile justice. That's where we teach.
Okay.
I mean, it's difficult for the administrators to administer punishment. I can't imagine the students, you know.
Good point.
I mean, they challenge everything, you know, it seems like you get challenged often. I would think that would be something that would be challenged a lot.
If we left this intact, the next order of business for somebody, and I guess I'm looking at you, Mr. Spurlock, is going to be to decide what a teen court is and how it's going to work. And it's got to work the same way in every school in the system.
Well, it wouldn't have to, he wouldn't have to use a teen court, and I'll let Mr. Sproul, but that would be an option. These are just.
Yeah, but he's got to have a system set up to do that, procedures.
If he chose to utilize the teen court option, so these are kind of operate as more. So he could do school-based community services, or a procedure could use school-based community services, participation in a school-based restorative justice program, or referral to a school-based teen court. So the director of schools looks at the options that there are, and it may not even be any of these three if those won't work for our system. And that's why that language of consist of but is not limited to is included in that. So those are just the three that the state has listed as options in this statute.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry? Yes.
Just a couple of thoughts here. I mean, first of all, I don't necessarily think this is a bad idea. I do know of situations where that kind of plan has worked, but to Mr. Holliday's point, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but my interpretation of what he's trying to say is, hey, this is a whole new out-of-the-box kind of thinking on that sort of a process for the truancy, and why would we have it in policy if we haven't even fleshed out and defined what it is yet? And I share that same concern. I don't think it's necessary, because when you look at the language of but is not limited to, it gives our director of schools, it would seem, a great deal of autonomy, or the principles, if you will, in how to apply, steps and that kind of thing, and even the possibility of adding additional things. But I do find it of a bit of concern that we would have something in there that we don't ourselves even know or can't even speak to what that means or what it is. And there's no reason why we couldn't go back and put it in later.
Can we speak to number 2?
Good question.
Yes.
My only thought, I'm not even sure how I will vote, but it is the one item that's not like any of the others. So we are talking about teen courts that I would be aware of would be addressing issues of student body concerns. This is a legal issue. My child is going to be truant, and you're potentially leaving that decision to a group of their peers. And that's very different than the others. The other items seem to be more directed by a principal, by the administrative team, the director of schools. So it does feel like it's the one thing that's not like the others, and I would have expected it up in Tier 1, as an early intervention, not as the very potentially last step before my child is involved in the criminal justice system. So I understand, though, limited to, I understand the flexibility in the policy, it doesn't mean we have to. So I don't necessarily think I'll vote against or for the motion, but I do have a feeling about teens making that level of decision.
Are we free to change, to put that at another level, another tier? Or do we have to have it in Tier 3?
The statute says it has to be with either Tier 2 or Tier 3. Both of those are pretty open, so the director of schools would have wide discretion to determine what procedures you would like to implement.
I would just say, I think what the statute says here is that we have to have a Tier 3 system to deal with kids who have not been successful in Tier 1 and Tier 2. It does not tell you what that system has to be in Tier 3. It's up to the school, the director of school, to figure out what that system's going to be. And it could be one of these three things here. It could be something else that's not even listed here. So all this says, the statute says, is you have to have a Tier 3 system of some sort. And it looks like what the TSBA is suggesting, that maybe that may hint at some school-based community services. So that's kind of, I guess, working in the library, working in the cafeteria, that type of, cleaning the grounds, cleaning the gym, that type of thing. Or some kind of restorative justice program. I'm not sure what that means, but that'll be up to the director of schools to figure out what that might be. But these are just three options that are available to the director of schools. He's not required to choose any of these three here. It's all the director of schools is required to do is set up some procedure for Tier 3. It might be another teacher committee that reviews them in tier 3. And that's not one of the 3 options the TSBA gave us, but that's something the director of schools can choose to do. Say, I'm going to refer this to a special committee of teachers to review the situation at that time. So I don't think, so whether you leave referral to a school-based teen court in here or not, I know it's not required by statute to have me in there. If you want to leave that in there for the future, and it's later on, the director of schools or the board decides to do a teen court, that will be a decision for another day to be implemented then. This kind of just leaves the door open for that should you want to do it in the future. It does not require it, it does not mandate it, it doesn't say you're going to have a teen court. It just says that may be one option that the director of schools may choose to do if the director of school chooses to do that later on. So all this says is in tier 3, the director of schools has to have procedures set up for tier 3. And tier 3 comes in is when you got a truant student who's tier 1 has not solved the problem, tier 2 hasn't solved the problem. So they've gone to tier 3 now, and what do you do about that student who's still truant after tier 1 procedures have failed, after tier 2 procedures have failed? What do you do then? You try to fix the truancy problem. So in the end, in the end, all of this says is the director of schools would develop a procedure for it. It doesn't tell you what procedure it's going to be. It's going to be up to the director of schools to figure out what the procedure is going to be. To that point. So basically, you're just saying, okay, director of schools, here's some tools we're giving you to try to figure out to address tier 3. You may choose 1 or 2 or 3 or none of these, or some other procedure altogether.
But I think for right now, you've got to have something here, correct?
You have to have something for tier 3.
And I think that was TSBA's point. And that's why I sought guidance from TSBA with this particular policy, because we needed to have something, and TSBA informed us we needed to have something more specific than it's at the director of schools' discretion. So that's why we included the specific language in the statute.
Unless you got to have something. Basically, you're going to start with something, and then you add to it or take away later.
So if a parent, we talked earlier about, this in the student handbook, according to this, it's the director of schools who's going to make that decision. A parent can't really come in there and say, this is what I want, you have to provide that for me. Is that correct? It's up to
correct. The director of schools would have an administrative procedure he would put in place saying, if we have a student who has reached tier 3, this is what we do with that student. The parent does not have an option of choosing any of these 3 items. It'll be what the director of schools adopts as the administrative procedure for tier 3.
And restorative justice practice could be the school counselor might involve talking to the counselor or viewing a film or something other that emphasizes the need to be there on time, and that could be any of a number of things. Just restorative is your key word. You're trying to change behavior, understand behavior.
Since I'm very troubled on this vote, and I am, I just want to make sure that I'm clear here. If we get to tier 3 with a student, the parent and the director of schools or this committee, whatever, decide, well, we're going to try so-and-so down here in tier 3. And the parent looks down there and seeing the handwriting on the wall says, oh, no, I want my student court. That can't happen.
It cannot happen.
All right. Okay.
I like the language. It says may consist of but not limited to.
Yep.
And in my mind,
That's good.
all.
It works for one child, doesn't work for another.
We have a motion to pass this with the and we have a second to implement this except for tier 3, number 3. That's the motion. Is that correct? That's right, isn't it? That's what we have. It's been a while. Okay. If there's no further comment on that motion, then we need to vote on that motion. So all in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. No. Boy, I'm torn. Okay. And we need a motion to adopt as is.
Motion to approve as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Blair. A second from someone. Numerous seconds. Comments?
What we're doing is we're saying that when the conference between our professional educators and the parents have failed in Tier 1, our additional efforts in Tier 2 have failed, then in Tier 3, potentially, we'll leave it up to the kids. Because we have this referral to a school-based teen court. And if you don't think that there are people in our system who will interpret those words that way, I just...
And the director will choose that.
There will be a parent who looks at that in the handbook and says, I want my teen court.
They can't
and we'll
do
say
that.
no. But because it's listed there, it will create a controversy. I just fail to see.
I think you run across that with anything. A parent can make an issue about anything in the handbook, but the answer is they don't have that authority to do so. Because it's in black and white, you know. You have to kind of, you're going to have situations, you're going to have exceptions to anything. Because we deal with a large number of people. But I don't think you're going to have a major problem.
I feel like that what this committee is resigning itself to is that there is greater wisdom in the state legislature or at TSBA than there is in this room, and I don't subscribe to that.
I put my confidence in the director. That's what it says here. The director of schools shall develop procedures for implementation.
But this committee adopts the policy, and we're choosing to include that. I think it's a mistake.
Okay, so noted. Any other comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, because one thing that seems too simple in my mind, if the director of schools will decide the policy, at some point in the future, it'll be decided and written and published. Is that correct? Or is it just going to be vague that at some point in the future, the director will decide? How does that procedure work?
Our administrative procedure functions much like our policy procedure without the policy committee. So we would work with the director of schools, my office would work with the director of schools to pen a administrative procedure. The director would approve that, and typically it does go before the board for at least oversight purposes, and that would be written. Those are included in the student handbook as well.
Because that will solve the whole issue.
Mm-hmm.
Once we just know what it is, that's
Yes.
what it is. Right now, we're just vague, and that's what we're struggling with.
Yes.
But if he very quickly will know what his intentions are and what will work, even if it has to be changed down the road, that'll be put in place, and then we'll know what it is, whether it includes it or not.
Yes, we have.
Time frame for that? Is it something that will happen before school starts?
Yes.
And insert into the handbook?
This policy, we have to have a procedure prepared before July 1st. So it will be before July 1st.
Even with the director of schools' determination of what the policy will be?
Yes, and that'd be the turnover.
That's very helpful.
Yes.
So what we see before us is not likely to be in the handbook? Because he will have determined what the procedure is.
This will still be in the handbook. With an addition, kind of a supplement. We do that quite a bit. The internet use policy is an administrative procedure. There are a lot of administrative procedures that are included in our handbook that complement policies and procedures that we have.
This will be a work in progress. This whole attendance thing is a work in progress. Because you really have changes in definitions about, I'm seeing different dates and times in the old every 5-day letter and all that. Part of it's going to be educating students, really.
Part of it's going to be what?
Educating students about about the sanctions and the other things that kick in.
And that they get to preside over their fellow students.
You know, I don't know whether that'll happen or not. I mean,
but it'll happen if we include it here in this policy. It potentially will happen. But if we don't include it here, then it potentially would not be discussed, or it could be brought up, but it won't be put in black and white in front of people.
Is it a bad idea?
It is a bad idea.
Then that's where we probably disagree.
We have a motion and a second. I don't want to cut off debate and discussion if somebody has something else they'd like to say on this topic. The motion, as I understand it, is to approve this as written. Is that correct?
Yes.
Any other comment? All in favor of that, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
Nay.
Part G.
So this is policy 6.2011. This is a new policy, which is why none of it is highlighted. There are no changes to this one yet. This is our voluntary pre-K attendance, and it goes into voluntary pre-K attendance. We do have a voluntary pre-K program here at Rutherford County Schools, and it lists Linda Pritchard. She is our pre-K instruction specialist. But it goes through the attendance policy. That attendance policy is adopted directly from guidance from the Department of Education at the state level. So that was taken there, and no changes outside of the contact for the pre-K program were included here.
Let me kind of tell you what this is. Voluntary pre-K is the one that the state basically provides the funding for us to operate the pre-K programs. And remember, they have to be free or reduced. It's a poverty program. It's full of kids with poverty programs. Here's what happened and why I'm sure the state's saying doing this. You have a set number of students you can have in the class. There's a waiting list of people typically needing to get in. You have some cases where some parents will say, this is a really good babysitting service. Maybe I can do this on Tuesday and Thursday, and I'll do something else other days. So what this simply says is, we're not going to let you take up a slot unless you're really to dedicate your kid, because this is to help the kid catch up and be ready, because it's addressing students who don't always have as much opportunity because of the poverty piece. But you need them at school to address it. So, you know, commit yourself to this, or we're going to let somebody else have the spot. That's what you're saying. Yes, they can. Yes, they can.
Oh, yeah, I think they're going to be terminated from the program under dismissal.
That was the purpose of it. Because in some, tried to treat it kind of as a daycare when I wanted.
Right. So have we seen a lot of abuse?
Not a lot, but you see some. Not a lot. Okay. That would be false to say that, but you do see some. Sure. You know.
Well, and I got to say, when I subbed the pre-K classes, everyone that I went to, it was a delight to be there. It's a very valuable program. And I really do think that, you know, they should be held to the fire. If they're not going to let their child benefit from it, let someone else.
There's no transportation. Parents have to bring them, pick them up. So there's some hurdles you have to go through to be a part of the program.
But it's worth it.
It is.
Oh my God,
I agree.
it's so worth it.
Just use it, please.
Yeah.
If there are further comments, the motion to approve. Thank you. A second? Thank you. Any further comments? All in favor, please say aye. 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 Anybody opposed? Part H.
Policy 6.304, this is our student discrimination, harassment, bullying, and cyberbullying and intimidation policy. That was hard to say 3 times fast. So this was another recommendation by TSBA. Our current policy does not define harassment. We are required to define it per the state statute. This change is just a direct quote from TCA section 49-6-4503, taken directly from the state statute, and it defines bullying, intimidation, and harassment in that highlighted portion. So this is just amended to include the harassment.
Comments?
So is this just limited to school time, or can this carry over to after school?
It can if the event that occurs after school substantially interferes with the student's education, and that happens quite a bit, as you can imagine, with the development of social media. It's definitely been a challenge for our school administrators to address. And so substantially interferes, that's another piece of language taken from the state statute and the state board's policy, and that is defined in case law. But it's going to be, that's going to change depending on the circumstances and the student, the age of the student, et cetera.
Need a motion? Thank you, Mr. Young. A second for Part H?
Second.
Thank you. Any further comment? Mr. Curley, my fault. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Aye.
And last but not least, policy 6.319. This reflects changes made by the state board to alternative school programs. There's no highlighting on this because there were pretty extensive changes by the state board. The state board cleaned out any outdated language and then clarified the minimum requirements of alternative schools. So our new policy aligns with those changes made by the state board. I can answer any questions that anyone has.
I think that's just to agree with state law, isn't it? We don't.
Yes, that state law is TCA section 49-6-3402.
Any comments from anyone? Questions? Need a motion? Thank you, Mr. Hodgson. Mr. Tollett, appreciate it. Any further comment? All in favor of aye, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed?
And that is it for me.
Ms. Bush, as usual, an excellent job, and the committee, as usual, an excellent job. Appreciate the considerable input and opinions and comments. Graduations begin, of course, tomorrow night with the Central Tigers. I'll see many of you at various graduations. Our next meeting will be Tuesday with the joint meeting here, and reminding you that that is a 5:30 meeting, and Commissioner Rhonda Allen will be in charge. It is a health and ed meeting. We're just attending and helping, and the director will present the budget. So we're looking forward to that. If there's anything else from anyone. Again, my thanks. We're adjourned.